Hello and welcome to the FATBOSS guide to the Treasure Guardian, Opulence.
Yes, this awesome two-phase encounter is all about buffs, and it is a meter hoard's dream, as during the final phase where you're dealing with the boss, you could be dealing over double damage than you usually do, with adds for you to pad on. But before we get to phase 2, of course, let's jump straight into it and talk about phase 1.
So before you pull the boss, you're going to need to assign a few things. So there's two pathways, one to the left and one to the right, each with their own mini-boss, which you have to defeat before you engage the final boss. You need to split your raid evenly into two groups and then assign them a side to run down. Next to assign is the buffs. In one of the later rooms down each corridor is a room full of jewels. Clicking on one of these jewels will give you a buff, making the final part of the encounter possible. Tanks can only take the diamond. This gives you an absorption shield with a 30-second recharge. One healer on each side must take the amethyst. This will stop your raid from being one-shot at some points. As for your other healers, they should be taking the sapphire. This buffs player output when you heal them. One DPS on each side need to take the ruby. This applies a stacking damage taken increase on the target that you're hitting. As for all the other DPS, you should really take the emerald. This increases your damage dealt whilst you remain still. Now you may also want one or two DPS on each side to also take the topaz. This applies a stacking debuff to you when no other players are stood near you. Once you've got 100 stacks, which takes around 95 seconds, you'll gain an aura around you, which increases all nearby players' critical strike chance by 100% for 20 seconds. This is obviously powerful as hell, especially if you have a large raid size and can rotate 5 players into your raid, essentially giving you 100% uptime of 100% critical strike chance. But that in itself requires quite a lot of coordination, and it really isn't necessary in normal heroic, and you might just have better results with everyone just taking the emerald. There is also an opal for DPS. This just gives a flat stacking damage increase whenever you hit a new target. This is great if the fight lasts long enough and you actually get multiple waves of adds for you to constantly stack this on, but for normal and heroic this isn't really going to happen. It's something that you'll probably look to use on mythic. So again, stick to using the emerald. Once you've organised who is taking what and who is going down which side, you can finally begin the fight.
As you fight the construct mini-bosses, they'll move from room to room every 10% health they lose, filling the previous room with fire. This just prevents you from going back, as the fire will pretty much one-shot you. Now each room has set traps for you to deal with, but for the most part you need to learn all of the traps you face rather than just what's in each room. Flame jets will erupt from the vaults on the side of the room. If you're hit, you'll take a moderate amount of fire damage. You do have plenty of time to avoid them if you keep an eye on the walls. Ruby beams will target a player and chase them down slowly, leaving fire patches behind. If you are being chased, try to take them to a wall or try to overlap them with other ones just to maximize space in the room. In the later rooms, players will be debuffed with Hex of Lethargy. Healers, you want to dispel this instantly, and you'll also have Pulse Quickening Toxin. This debuff is applied to the entire raid and deals ever increasing ticking damage over its duration, and eventually it will flat out one-shot you. Fortunately, it is removed the moment you leave that room. If you do drop below 50% with this debuff, you actually gain a buff, which increases the secondary stats you have by a small amount for 10 seconds. You definitely do not need this buff, so you shouldn't really go out of your way to deliberately let people drop below 50%. For the most part, Pulse Quickening Toxin is relevant if you manage to do the room quickly. So that's all the traps. Let's talk about the constructs. Both of them have Crush. This is a slow cast that deals a large amount of damage and stuns players that get hit. It's in a frontal cone that's generally faced towards the tank. You just need to quickly identify where it's going to be slamming and make sure you move quickly and don't get hit by this, because it's mainly the stun that's going to kill you, especially if you get stunned in the path of one of the traps. The left construct will debuff players with Volatile Charge. This debuff deals ticking damage and leaves behind a patch that pulses damage to players on top of them when it expires. You want to drop these close to the edge of the room away from other players. The right construct will cast Flame of Punishment. This deals a large amount of fire damage in a cone directly in front of the construct as he slowly rotates. Just make sure you're behind the construct and mirror your movement to his. That way you'll dodge the ability easily. Now when the constructs get to 40% health, they'll enter the room with the jewels. Everyone needs to click on their assigned jewel and continue the fight as normal. However, on heroic, picking up a jewel gives you a debuff that deals lethal shadow damage to you when it expires 30 seconds later. Healers with the amethyst buff, however, can cover this. Healing a player whilst you have the amethyst buff applies a 60-second 90% damage reduction to shadow damage. This also gives mana back to players within 10 yards of the player when they do take shadow damage. So the moment the jewels have been picked up, you need to coat the entire raid with the buff to stop them from being one-shot. At 30%, they'll enter a much larger room and overload. This deals a small amount of ticking damage to the group, but empowers the Volatile Charge, making the targeting circle and remaining patch much larger. If You've got to make use of the space within the room the best you can just to make sure you don't run out of it. This also empowers the Flame of Punishment, increasing the size of the cone drastically. However, this doesn't really change how you deal with it. Now, whilst you begin to kill both of them off, it's important that you keep their health in check. Phase 2 begins shortly after one of the construct dies, and the phase starts with the boss trying to draw their essence, giving him 100% damage increase for each one alive, which will wipe you if he does it successfully. So you got to make sure that the constructs both die within a short time period of one another. Once both are dead, you can make your way into the final room.
So this last part of the fight is really simple. The moment you enter the room, you'll want your entire raid to stack directly behind the boss, apart from any DPS with a topaz, as of course they'll still want to keep stacking the buff. The only time that you ever need to move out of this clump of players is when you get the liquid gold debuff. This debuff deals ticking damage, and when it expires it'll spawn a puddle of shit on the ground. Just make sure that these debuffs expire away from the raid, ideally against the edges of the room. One of the reasons why you're stacked is for the coin shower. This is a 10-second debuff on a random player that deals lethal damage to that player when it expires. The damage can however be split amongst all players within 7 yards of them. By stacking, you completely negate this debuff and no one has to move, which means no one loses any of their emerald stacks and it's far easier to heal up the damage. Stacking in melee also allows you to swap to the Spirit of Gold ads immediately. These ads spawn directly underneath the boss on a timer and will begin to travel to the edges of the room. If they reach the edge, they'll cast on random players spawning patches underneath them, which deals moderate damage, which will force you to move from them. These ads can be crowd controlled in almost every way possible, with grips and vortexes definitely being the most powerful. If all DPS swaps to them immediately, they should die well before they even look towards moving towards the edges. As for tanks in this phase, you'll be hit by Coin Sweep. This just deals a large burst of physical damage. We didn't find that a tank swap was needed on this ability, but if you really wanted to, you could swap between each diamond buff recharge just to minimise the damage. Last to mention is the Wail of Greed. When the boss reaches maximum energy, he'll channel this spell, dealing gigantic shadow damage to the entire raid. This, however, because it is shadow damage, can be significantly reduced by the Amethyst healing buff, which almost completely negates the spell. At the end of the cast, he will gain a permanent 15% damage increase, which stacks each time he finishes a Wail of Greed cast. So you've kind of got to kill the boss before this ability is cast too many times, and he gains too many stacks of the damage increase. But that's the encounter, so just to conclude, you need to get the hang of doing the corridors, get the right buffs, stack behind the boss, move out a liquid gold, and just nuke the living shit out of the boss and ads before the Wail of Greed becomes too powerful.
Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you do want a handy written guide to refer to during your raid, or you just want some more detailed info about this fight, especially to do with those jewels, then do go check out our guide over on Wowhead. A link for that can be found in the description below. Once again, thank you so much for watching. If this guide did help you out, then make sure you leave us a like. It really does help us out. And of course, we shall see you all in the next one.
Thanks for watching.